My wolf had been still for a long time. Not dead, I want to be precise about that. He had simply gone quiet the way deep water goes quiet, nothing on the surface, everything underneath. 3 years since my last summit. 3 years of councils, border disputes, the grinding work of keeping 4,000 wolves fed and safe through 2 hard winters. My wolf had learned to wait. He stopped waiting the moment I rode through Veldrath's gate. I did not understand it at first. The hold was what the summons had described. A mountain fortress, old stone, the outer wall carved with wolves so worn by wind that they looked more like suggestions of wolves than actual ones. The courtyard was full of the usual summit activity. Grooms taking horses, pack seconds comparing weapons with the careful disinterest of men who are actually counting everything. A fire burning at the center that no one needed for warmth, but everyone wanted to stand near. I had attended 9 summits. I knew the choreography by heart. But my wolf rose the moment we crossed the threshold. Not the aggressive rise, not the hackles up, hold the ground surge I knew from contested borders. This was something else. He rose the way he rises when I am almost asleep and I hear a sound I cannot name but somehow already know. Alert, still, listening with everything he had. I kept my face neutral. I was good at that. My second Ovrin rode close on my left and murmured, "The Veldrath Elder Rannoch. He is watching you from the upper walkway. 3rd window." I found the window without turning my head and noted the old alpha, broad, gray-muzzled, the posture of a man who had ruled this hold for 40 years and expected to be told everything. I gave him the courtesy nod of a visiting alpha and kept moving. But my wolf was not interested in Rannoch. He was not interested in anything I could see. The other summit delegation had arrived before us, the Ironfen pack, led by a young alpha named Brecken who wore his authority like new armor, slightly too large, slightly too shining. He was watching me the way young alphas always watch an older one, measuring. I noted him and moved on. My wolf pulled north, toward the hold's interior, toward something I had not yet seen. "Find us the guest quarters," I told Ovrin, "and find out who runs this hold's household. I want to know the staff who has access to the summit rooms, who serves the meals." Standard security practice for a summit. Ovrin nodded and went, but I was not thinking about security when I asked. I was thinking about why my wolf had gone from years of silence to this. This held breath attention, this leaning toward the interior of a hold I had never visited in my life. I saw her that same evening, in the corridor outside the Great Hall. She was carrying a lamp, one of the iron ones the hold used for the long servant passages, where the torches did not reach. The lamp threw light upward and to the left, and she was holding it without looking at it, the way you hold something you have carried 10,000 times. She was wearing the gray of the hold's household staff, a long-sleeved dress, plain, a work apron, boots that had seen serious use. Her hair was dark and loose at the back, pinned at the temples. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the join between 2 floor stones, the way a person looks when they are thinking hard about something entirely unrelated to their surroundings. She walked past the archway without pausing. My wolf did not breathe. I stood in the arch for longer than I should have. I am aware of how that looks. The visiting Alpha King standing in the passage staring at nothing, and then I made myself move. I found Ovrin in the guest hall. He had the list I asked for. Household is run by the head steward, man named Korath, 30 years in service to Rannoch. Kitchen staff of 7, 4 lamplighters, 2 of them on night rotation, 3 women who manage the summit linens and the formal table service, he consulted his notes. And 1 ward of the hold, not exactly household staff, but she helps everywhere. Name is Senna. She has been here since she was 4 years old. Rannoch took her in after her parents died in the Greywood border skirmish. What pack is she from? None, technically. Her parents were from a small northern family, now dispersed. She has no living pack claim. He paused. She is also, the staff refer to her as Wolfless. Apparently she has never shifted. There was a mark assessment done when she was 12, and the reading came back faint enough that the hold elder at the time declared her wolf absent. She's been here as a ward ever since. He looked up. The staff are decent to her, from what I can see. No cruelty. She's just invisible, the way people who don't fit get invisible. I said nothing. My wolf, who had not moved since the corridor, was still holding that held breath attention, pointed toward the north wing of the hold like a compass needle that has finally found north and refuses to swing. "Is that all?" I asked Ovrin. "That's all on the household." He handed me the notes. Summit agenda in the morning. Elder Rannick wants the water rights dispute addressed first. Brecken of Ironfen wants the border survey second. I'd recommend we go third. Let them spend themselves on each other before we have to commit to anything. Agreed, I said. I set the notes down without reading them. I spent the rest of that evening thinking about the way she had held the lamp, not with the careful attention of someone worried about spilling it, with the ease of someone who had carried it so many times that her body had absorbed the task entirely, leaving her mind completely free. I had known a great healer once who held his instruments that way, decades of practice making room for thought. It was not the habit of an absent person. It was the habit of someone with a great deal going on inside. The first day of the summit was the water rights dispute, and it was exactly as tedious as I expected. Elder Rannick and Alpha Brecken of Ironfen had a genuine grievance between them, a stream that ran through contested high ground, 2 packs drawing from it, one dry season already weathered badly. I had no stake in the stream. My territory was lowland, well-watered. I was here because the Veldrath-Ironfen axis mattered for the northern trade route, and a broken alliance between them would cost my pack a great deal in rerouted commerce. So I sat and I listened, and I occasionally said things that sounded like wisdom, but were mostly designed to keep both of them from standing up and ending the summit before the real work was done. Senna brought the midday meal. I had not expected her there. I had assumed the formal meal service would go to the household's senior women. But she came in with a tray of bread and the first course, and she moved through the summit hall with the same unhurried attention she had shown in the corridor. She did not look at me. She set things on the table without interrupting the conversation, refilled cups without being asked, and was 3 steps toward the door before Brecken's second said, loudly to Brecken, "Who is the Wolfless girl? Is she safe to have in here?" The room did not quite go silent, but it slowed. Rannick said from the head of the table, "She is my ward. She has served this hold for 20 years. I trust her in every room." Brecken's second, a blocky, satisfied man named Thurick, shrugged. "I don't doubt her loyalty. I doubt her usefulness in a room full of alphas. If she has no wolf, she can't read the room. She can't tell if something is wrong. She's a liability." Senna had stopped walking. She had not turned around. She stood with her back to the table, the empty tray at her side, and she was looking at the door with the expression of a person who has heard this particular note played many times and has learned to let it run out on its own. I said she navigated 12 senior wolves in a summit room with 3 competing agendas and did not spill a drop. I would say she reads rooms very well. Thurick looked at me. There was a moment of recalibration, you could see it, the assessment of whether it was worth arguing with the Ashmark Alpha on a point this minor. He settled back. "As you say." Senna left without looking back. But she had turned her head very slightly at my voice, just the angle a fraction of a degree. I had been watching closely enough to see it. My wolf had not taken his eyes off her since she entered the room. I found reasons to be in the corridors that evening. This is not something I am proud of strategically. Ovrin would have raised an eyebrow if he had known I was walking the hold's servant passages at 3 in the evening on the pretext of familiarizing myself with the layout. But my wolf was impossible to argue with, and I had long since learned that ignoring him on matters of this weight cost more than indulging him. I found her in the lower archive. The hold kept its old treaty documents in a room off the north corridor. Veldrath was meticulous about records, I had noticed, and she was there with a lamp and a stack of folded linen, replacing the cloth underlays the documents rested on. Damp had gotten in. Careful work. She heard me at the doorway before I spoke. She did not startle. She said, without turning, "The summit documents are in the upper archive, not this one. Steward Korath has the key if you need access." "I don't need the summit documents," I said. She turned then. She looked at me with the calm assessment of a person who does not intimidate easily, not defiance, not deference. Just a direct, unhurried look. "Then is there something I can help you find?" I said, "I am not sure yet." It was an honest answer. It was also a strange one, and she tilted her head very slightly the way a person does when they are deciding whether a strange answer deserves a strange follow-up. She decided it did not, and she went back to the documents. I stayed in the doorway. "How long have you worked the archives?" I asked. "I don't particularly. I go where I'm needed. Tonight it's here." "And tomorrow?" "Tomorrow there's a summit. I'll be in the kitchen until the formal meal and then serving. She smoothed a cloth underlay into position without looking up. If you're asking whether I'll be in rooms I shouldn't, I won't. That is not what I was asking. A pause, she looked up again. The lamp was on the table between us, and the light came up under her face, and I saw what I had not been close enough to see before. She was tired in the way that people get tired when they have been carrying a weight for so long that they have forgotten it is a weight. It has simply become the shape of their life. "What were you asking then?" she said. My wolf pressed forward, a sensation like leaning, like reaching. I made myself stay still. "I was asking about you," I said, "not about the summit." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Nobody asks about me here. You should know that so you understand the question is strange." "I know it's strange," I said. "Ask anyway, you can tell me to leave." She looked at me for a long moment. The lamp flame moved. The documents sat in their careful rows. She said, "I have been here 20 years. I know every room in this hold. I know where the old pipes freeze in winter and where the roof leaks first when the snow starts to melt. I know the names of every wolf in the hold, which ones are trouble, which ones are gentle, which ones are afraid but pretend otherwise." She set a cloth underlay down precisely. "I know all of that, and none of it counts for anything because I don't shift. That is what you are really asking about, I think. Why someone like me is still here." "Why are you?" I asked. She considered it, an honest consideration, not a deflection. "Because this is the only home I have," she said, "and because I am useful, and because—" She stopped. "And because," I said. "And because I am not quite ready to stop hoping that the assessment was wrong," she said, very quietly. Without embarrassment, but also without ease, the way a person says something they have not said aloud in years, and finds that saying it still costs them something. My mark, the ash mark, the burn on the inside of my right wrist that my bloodline carries when a true mate is near, had been warm since I entered the room. I had thought it was the heat of the lamp. I understood now that it was not. I said, "I think the assessment was wrong." She looked at me, a very still look. "You've been here 2 days," she said. "My wolf has been watching you since I arrived," I said. "He is not wrong." She did not answer. She looked back at the documents with an expression I could not read completely. Something between the thing you feel when you've waited for water in a dry season, and it finally starts to rain, and the thing you feel when you're not sure yet if what you heard is thunder or something else. I left her to the archive. My mark burned warm the entire walk back. The second day of the summit was the border survey. Brecken had brought a map that favored Ironfin's claims in 3 places. Rannoch had a countermap. I had anticipated this and had asked Ovrin the previous evening to locate the original survey documents, which, as it happened, were in the lower archive, and which Senna had restacked with the new underlay cloths. When I produced them, Brecken's map's most aggressive claims deflated visibly. We worked through the morning. I kept one part of my attention on the room and one part, the quieter part, on my mark. It burned steady. She was somewhere in the hold, and she was close enough that I could feel it. In the afternoon recess, I found Ovrin. I asked him quietly what he knew about the hold's mark assessment practice. He looked at me with the particular expression of a second who has been with his alpha long enough to read what isn't said. "I can find out," he said. "How far back?" 22 years, I said. "Maybe 23. He came back an hour later. We walked the outer battlements where no one could hear us. "The assessment elder at the time was a man named Dorith," he said. "He died 6 years ago. There are some things said about his methods among the older pack members here. His assessments ran conservative, very conservative. 2 other wolves he assessed as faint turned out to have full shifts by their mid-20s. They just bloomed late, or the grief did something to the timing." "Grief," I said. "Her parents died when she was 4. She came here at 4. The assessment was done when she was 12. He paused. "It's possible the loss closed something. Grief wounds in young wolves when they're that young, when the loss is that complete. Sometimes the wolf doesn't go absent. The wolf just goes very, very quiet." He looked at me. "Like they're waiting." My wolf had been quiet for 3 years. I knew something about that. "The ash mark," I said. Ovrin did not say anything for a moment. Then, "How warm." "Since the corridor on the first evening." He breathed out, "Cairn." "I know. She's been here 20 years, if she is what the mark says she is." "She is," I said. My wolf has not been uncertain for a single moment since we arrived. Avrin was quiet. He was working through what this meant, the protocol, the summit still in session, the politics of claiming a ward of a host pack while you were a guest under their roof. None of it was simple. He knew it, and I knew it. "The summit ends tomorrow," he said. "I know that too," I said. I looked out over the hold's courtyard. Below, the Ironfin second, Thuric, the one who had made the comment about Senna in the summit hall, was talking with two of his pack brothers with the comfortable ease of men who expected to leave in the morning and considered the summit already concluded in their favor. They were laughing about something. The sound carried clearly in the cold air. My wolf watched them with flat, quiet attention. She found me that second evening. Or rather, she came to the summit hall to collect the evening's linens, and I was there, and I did not leave when she entered. She saw me by the window. She set her basket down on the end of the long table and began folding the cloths that had been laid out for the formal service, and for a moment neither of us said anything. The hall was empty except for us, the fire low, the candles half burned, the smell of old stone and pine, and the cold coming through the gap in the northern shutter. "You know," she said finally without looking up, "the other wolves in the hold have noticed you watching." "I imagine they have," I said. "They think you're assessing me for some kind of threat, or they think you're suspicious of Rannick using his ward somehow in the summit." Thuric of Ironfin apparently made a comment to his second about it. "What did he say?" "That the Ashmark Alpha has odd habits." She folded a cloth with precise, economical movements. "He's not wrong, it is odd." "Probably," I agreed. She looked up then, the low firelight was behind her. "Why does it burn?" she asked, directly. Not accusatory, just the question of a person who has decided that directness is worth more than safety. "Your mark. It's been burning since yesterday. I can see it from here. I've been able to see it all day." I looked down at my wrist. In the low light, the ash mark was a faint gold, the dormant glow, not the full blaze, but visible if you knew what you were looking at. She didn't know what she was looking at. I wondered how long she had been watching. "You know what the ash mark means?" I said. "I know what it's supposed to mean," she said. "It means the alpha carrying it is near his true mate." She kept her eyes on mine. "I also know that I have no wolf, or I have been told for 20 years that I have no wolf. Which is beginning to feel like two different things." "They are two different things," I said. "I think your wolf is there. I think she has been there the whole time. I think the grief of losing your parents at 4 when you were still new enough that the loss hit your wolf as completely as it hit you, I think it closed her off. Not gone. Waiting." She was very still. The cloth in her hands had stopped moving. "My bloodline's mark," I said, "has never once burned for someone without a wolf. It does not make mistakes on that question. My wolf has been watching you since we crossed this hold's threshold. He is not confused. He is not." I stopped. I had planned to say reading you wrong. What came out instead was simpler. "He has been waiting for you." "I think he has been waiting longer than I realized." Senna set the cloth down. She put both hands flat on the table and looked at them, and I could see the effort of someone processing a thing they have wanted to be true for a very long time and are not sure they can trust yet. "I don't shift," she said, not an argument, a fact she was laying out carefully so that neither of us was confused. "Not yet," I said. She looked up. "You don't know that." "My wolf does," I said, "and I have learned to trust him on the things that matter." We stayed there in the low firelight for a while, the sound of the hold settling around us, the creak of old timber, the wind outside, the distant sound of Avrin's voice somewhere in the upper passage, probably worrying. I did not move toward her. I did not need to. Everything that mattered in that moment was already happening. The slow, warm burn of the mark, the way the air between us had changed from the first day I arrived to this one, the way she was looking at me with that direct, careful attention and not looking away. "The summit ends tomorrow," I said. "I know," she said. "I am not planning to leave without you." A long silence. The fire settled. She looked at me and I could see the thing behind her eyes, the wariness, the 20 years of being invisible, the assessment at 12 that had shaped every year since. I could see all of it. And under all of it, like deep water, I could see the thing my wolf had seen from the corridor on the first evening. She was not afraid of me. She was afraid of herself, of wanting something that had been taken from her so early that she had almost stopped believing it existed. "You should probably sleep," she said finally. Summit last day is always the hardest. Probably, I agreed. She picked up the cloth again. I left the hall. My mark burned the whole way up the stairs, steady as a kept promise. The third day of the summit nearly ended before it began. It was Thurick. I want to be fair about this. I do not think he planned what happened. I think he was the kind of man who operates at the edge of what he can get away with, and he had been getting away with things for long enough that his sense of the edge had drifted badly. We were an hour into the final session, the ratification of the water rights language, the formal witness of the border survey adjustment, the tedious but necessary business of making the last 2 days legally binding, when Elder Rannoch raised a point about the phrasing in one of Ironfin's clauses. It was a genuine concern, the kind that catches in the throat of a careful old alpha because he has seen bad phrasing come back to cost him in 30 years of summits. He laid it out methodically. Thurick's patience had been thinning all morning. He had been sitting slightly wrong in his chair since the session opened, the taut, coiled position of a man who has already decided he's spent too long here. When Rannoch finished his point, Thurick said, "The elder is wasting our time on semantics," in a tone that left no question about what he thought of elders who wasted his. Rannoch said carefully, "The semantics are the treaty." "The treaty is already agreed," Thurick said. "This is you looking for leverage you didn't earn in the room." Brecken, to his credit, said, "Thurick." But Thurick was already standing. Not in the full, formal way of a challenge, more in the careless way of a man who has decided the constraints of the room no longer apply to him. He leaned forward over the table toward Rannoch with the posture of someone who wants to be just close enough to make a point without quite crossing the line into something formal. He was bigger than Rannoch. Rannoch was old. The room had shifted, that fast animal shift that happens in rooms full of wolves when someone tests the boundary and finds it momentarily soft. The door to the servants' passage was on the north wall. It opened because Senna came through it with the midday tray early, as it turned out, because the kitchen had run ahead on the timing. She saw the room in one instant. She set the tray down. And she walked between Thurick and Rannoch. Not dramatically, not with any announcement. She simply put herself in the space between them, the way you put a hand in a door that is about to close on something that matters. She looked at Thurick with the same direct, unhurried attention she gave everything else. "The formal meal is ready," she said. "If you would like to continue the session after, the room will be set." Thurick looked at her. The contempt in his face was immediate and unthinking, the automatic dismissal of someone he had categorized as beneath notice on the first day and had not reconsidered. He said, "Get out of the way, Wolfless." And everything happened at once. The word landed in the room like a stone hitting still water. I was on my feet. I was aware of that, the movement so fast and instinctive that I was simply standing before I had decided to stand. Rannoch drew breath. Brecken's hand went to his chair arm, and Senna. Senna went still, a different kind of still than I had seen from her before, not the quiet of someone carrying a weight. The still of something just before it moves, the held moment, the catching breath of a thing that has been waiting a very long time and has finally, in one careless word, been given the signal to stop waiting. The grief wound broke. I did not know how else to describe it then or now. I had read about it in the old records, a wolf wound held closed by loss, the wolf going dormant, waiting in the dark of the person's chest for something to shift. What shifts it is different every time. Sometimes it is joy. Sometimes it is the mate bond finally coming close enough to pull. Sometimes it is a hurt delivered so cleanly and so thoughtlessly that the grief self recognizes the echo of the original wound, and the whole mechanism releases. She had heard Wolfless for 20 years, but she had not heard it like that, from someone who wanted her to understand that she did not count, in a room full of every alpha who had any say in what she became. The wolf inside her said, "No more." The light came first. That is the thing about white lunas, the old texts say it, and I had never quite believed it until that moment. Before the shift there is light, a glow that starts below the skin and rises, and if you are in the room when it happens, you feel it before you see it, like warmth from a fire that has no visible flame. The whole summit hall went warm. Senna shifted. The white Luna who emerged was not like the tentative, uncertain form of a wolf shifting for the first time. She was fully arrived, the form of someone whose wolf had been present and complete and waiting for 20 years, who had simply never been given room to breathe. The Luna was large, larger than most, white as new ice with a silver mark on her left shoulder that matched the pattern of no known pack line anyone in the room could identify. Except me. The ash mark on my wrist did not just warm, it blazed. A full gold fire visible through my sleeve, and I felt it all the way up my arm and into my chest, the recognition, the destined settling, the thing my wolf had been leaning toward since we crossed the gate. There she is, he said. Not in words, wolves don't use words, in the certainty that has no opposite. The summit hall was absolutely silent. Thurick had stepped back. He had not planned to, his body had simply done it. The involuntary deference response of any wolf in the presence of a Luna whose light is fully arrived. He looked like a man who had tripped over something he was certain wasn't there. Rannick was on his feet, and for the first time in the 2 days I had watched him, the old alpha looked genuinely shaken, not afraid, but struck. The expression of a man reckoning with something he had gotten badly wrong for a very long time. Brecken of Ironfen was standing too. His hand was not on his chair arm anymore. It was at his side, open, the unconscious posture of submission. He had not known he was going to do it. The white Luna stood in the center of the summit hall. She was looking at me. I crossed the floor. I did not hurry. There was no need to hurry. Everything in the room was held in that particular stillness that arrives after something inevitable finally happens. The relief of it, the rightness of it, the slight shock of a world rearranging into a shape it should have been in all along. I took off my cloak, the heavy gray and gold one, the ash-mark sigil along the border, and I laid it across her back where she stood. The Luna's light dimmed to a steady warm glow, not gone, just no longer filling the room to its edges. She shifted back slowly, and Senna stood in the center of the hall in my cloak, her hair loose around her shoulders, her face composed and a little stunned, the expression of a woman who has just arrived in a room she was not sure she would ever be allowed to enter. Her name, I said to the room, is Senna. She is my fated mate. I looked at Rannick. She has been under your roof for 20 years, Elder. She was never wolfless. She was grieving. I said it without heat, not an accusation, a fact. The assessment was done by a man who assessed conservative and in a girl who had lost everything she had at 4 years old and was protecting herself the only way her wolf knew how. Rannick said nothing. He sat down slowly, and he looked at Senna the way old alphas look when they have made a mistake of decades and are holding it in both hands and trying to understand the weight of it. She will come with me when I leave tomorrow, I said, if she chooses. I looked at Senna. She was looking back at me with those direct, careful eyes. The cloak was very large on her. I am not a small man. And she had gathered the front of it in both hands without realizing she had done it, holding on to it the way you hold on to something that you had stopped letting yourself want and are now, suddenly, allowed to have. Is that a choice? She said, very quietly, only I could hear it. Everything about this is a choice, I said. What I want is known, what you want is yours. She held the cloak. The summit hall waited. Thurick was very still in the corner where he had backed himself, and I noted without looking at him that he had not yet managed to look up from the floor. Senna said yes. The word was small, and it was enormous, and it was the most certain thing said in that hall across 3 days of summiting. What followed was not simple. I want to be honest about that. The claiming before the summit was clear and unmistakable, 3 alphas and their seconds as witnesses, the ash mark blazing, the Luna's light undeniable, but the practical business of it took the rest of the afternoon and part of the evening. Rannick requested a private meeting. I granted it. He was not a bad man. He had taken in a 4-year-old child when no one else would. He had given her a roof and decent treatment and 20 years of safety. He had also failed to understand what he had in his care, and he knew it. And he sat across the table from me in his study and said so in the blunt way of an old alpha who does not have the patience left for soft words. I believed Dorith, he said. He assessed 40 wolves in his time and was wrong on 2. I thought that record was reliable. He was wrong on 3, I said. Senna is the 3rd. Rannick looked at his hands. I kept her from the ceremonies. Every year at the full moon, every mateship rite, every solstice marking, I kept her out because it seemed unkind to have her there among the wolves who could shift, watching what she thought she couldn't do. He paused. I thought I was being merciful. You were trying to be, I said. It is not the same thing. No, I agreed, it is not. We sat with that for a moment. The study was full of old things, the accumulated weight of 4 decades of ruling, treaty documents, records, the small objects that gather around a long life. A wolf's pack is its history. This was his. "She is my ward," he said. "Not my blood. I have no formal hold on her consent. The choice is hers." He looked up. "But I would ask, will you let her come back? This is still her home, whatever else it becomes." "As often as she wishes," I said. "For as long as she wishes, she chose to leave nothing behind. She is adding something." He nodded. He looked, for the first time since I had arrived, like a man whose body was reporting its age to him honestly. "She is remarkable," he said. "She has always been remarkable. I just didn't have eyes for the specific kind." "Most people don't," I said. "That's what the assessment systems are for, and when they fail, we fail." We shook hands. His grip was still very strong. I found Senna in the lower archive. She was packing nothing, which I found interesting. She was sitting on the low stool near the document shelves with the lamp on the table, and she was holding one of the old underlay cloths, one of the ones she had replaced 2 days ago, and she was looking at it with the expression of someone in the middle of a complicated conversation with themselves. She heard me at the doorway. She did not say who she thought it was. She just said, "I always thought if it ever happened, if I ever shifted, I would feel different, like something had been added." "Do you feel different?" I asked. "I feel the same," she said, "except," she stopped. "Except the weight is gone, the thing I've been carrying that I stopped being able to name because I carried it so long." She looked up. "I still feel like me, just lighter." "That is what it should feel like," I said. "The wolf was always you. She didn't add anything. She just came home." Senna looked at me for a long moment. The lamp was between us again, the same lamp, the same light upward and to the left. She said, "You were very certain for 2 days, before anything happened." "My wolf was certain," I said. "I try to trust him." Even when it was strange, standing in corridors, coming to an archive for no reason. "Especially then," I said. "The obvious things don't need much trust." Something in her face settled, the last small guardedness, the final residue of 20 years of calibrating expectations downward. She set the cloth down. "I don't have anything to pack," she said. "I never accumulated much. I could be ready in an hour." "There is no hurry," I said. "The summit closes formally in the morning. We ride after." "All right." She looked around the archive, the shelves, the documents in their careful rows, the underlay cloths she had just replaced. I think she was memorizing it, the way you memorize a room you are leaving that was not a bad room, only one that was not where you belonged. Then she looked back at me. "The ceremony hall," she said. "What about it?" "Rannoch kept me out of it. Every ceremony, every rite. I have never been inside it." I thought about this. "Would you like to go in?" "Yes," she said, very simply. The way she said yes to everything, direct, without apology, as if she had decided that this particular quality was worth keeping. The ceremony hall was dark when we entered. Not dark dark. The hold kept a banked fire in it always, the old custom, the idea that the pack's fire should never fully go out. The banked fire threw a low red-orange glow across the floor, which was old pale stone, and lit the lower half of the carved wolf pillars that ran along both sides. The hall was large, built for the full pack at its ceremonies, which meant 200 wolves at least. At this hour it was empty. Our footsteps made the hall's particular silence, which is the silence of a room that has held a great deal of living and holds the echo of it. Senna walked to the center. She stood there and looked up at the ceiling, which was beamed timber, the beams carved with the same worn wolf suggestions as the outer wall. I stood near the entrance and watched her. She turned slowly once, not dancing, just looking, taking it in, the hall that had been closed to her for 20 years. She said, without turning all the way back to me, "I used to stand at the window of the north corridor on ceremony nights and listen. You can hear the howling from there. The full moon rites when the pack shifts and runs together. I used to listen to it every month." A pause. "I stopped about 4 years ago. It was easier." "You won't have to listen from a window anymore," I said. She turned to face me. The firelight was on her, low, warm, making the edges of everything soft. "No," she said. "I suppose I won't." She walked toward me slowly, and when she reached me she stopped, and she was looking at my wrist. The ash mark, which was burning steady gold in the low light, had been burning since the corridor on the first evening and would, I suspected, burn at this level for the rest of my life. She reached out slowly, asking in the gesture rather than the word, and I turned my wrist up, and she put 2 fingers against the mark. It blazed, not painfully, there was nothing painful in it. It blazed the way something blazes when it is recognized, when the thing it was designed for is finally present. She felt it too. I could see it in the catch of her breath, the slight widening of her eyes. "I can feel it," she said. "I couldn't before. Even this morning before the shift, I couldn't feel anything from you. Now it's," she searched for the word, "like a door that opened." "That is exactly what it is," I said. She left her fingers on the mark for a moment longer. Then she lowered her hand and she looked up at me and she said, "I am going to need some time." "Yes," I said, "so am I." "You're very sure about this?" "My wolf is very sure," I said. "I am sure because he is sure and because I have spent 2 days watching you move through a hold that treated you as furniture and never once see yourself through their eyes. You have always known what you were worth. You just weren't allowed to prove it." I paused. "You also stepped between a rival alpha's second and an old man without hesitating." "That is not nothing." "I didn't think about it," she said. "I know," I said. "That's the point." She was quiet. The banked fire settled, a small sound in the large quiet of the hall. She said, "I don't know your hold, I don't know your pack, I don't know your routines or your people or what they will think of this." "My hold is in the Ashmark Valley," I said. "It is warmer than here. My pack is 4,000 wolves, decent people. They will think what my wolf thinks and my mark tells them. As for the routines, I have a very good steward. Better than I am at most of the daily work, honestly. You won't have to learn everything at once." A small sound escaped her, not quite a laugh, but related to one. The first such sound I had heard from her. It changed her face entirely. "You make it sound manageable," she said. "It is manageable," I said. "Most of it is just being somewhere you belong." She looked at me for a long moment. The mark burned between us, steady and warm, and the hall held us in its old silence, and the fire kept its low red-orange glow across the old pale stone floor. Then she said, "All right." And then, after a pause, "I'll need the morning to say goodbye properly." "Take all the morning you need," I said. We left Veldrath Hold at midday. The whole pack turned out. This was not, I think, entirely planned by Rannick. It had the feeling of something that simply happened, the way things happen in packs when news travels faster than any instruction to contain it. The courtyard was full when we came down. Wolves in their morning forms and their wolf forms, the kitchen staff, the summit delegations both preparing to depart, the old wolves who held the memory of the hold in their bones. Thurick of Ironfen was there. I watched him in my peripheral vision as we crossed the courtyard. He had not spoken since the summit hall, not to me, not as far as I knew, to anyone else. He stood with his arms at his sides and his eyes on the ground, and when Senna passed near him he took one step back, involuntary, as if his body had learned something his mind was still working on. Good. Some lessons need to start in the body and work their way inward. Rannick met us at the gate. He looked at Senna with the complicated expression I had seen in his study. The reckoning, the long weight of it, and underneath that, something simpler. The particular grief of recognizing what you had and failing to properly see it. He said, "You were always one of ours." Senna said, "I know," not bitterly, just as a fact. "I'm still one of yours, I'm also something else now." He put his hand on her shoulder, the Hold Elder's formal acknowledgement, the gesture that says you are known here and will be welcomed back. She let him, and then she stepped past him and she walked through the gate. My horse was ready. Ovrin had managed the logistics of departure with his usual silent efficiency and was waiting with an expression of cautious satisfaction. The expression of a second who has learned something unexpected and decided it is, on balance, a very good thing. I mounted. Senna was helped to the horse Rannick had provided, a steady gray mountain horse, sure-footed, built for the pass roads. We rode out of the courtyard and onto the mountain road, the cold air coming down off the peaks, the sound of Veldrath behind us fading with each turn of the switchback. After a while Senna said, "Is it always like that, a summit?" "Like what?" "That charged, that ready to go wrong at any moment." "Mostly," I said, "you get used to it." "I don't think I want to get used to it," she said. "Fair," I said. "You don't have to attend them." She considered this. "No," she said after a moment. "I think I do. I think I'd want to know what's happening." She paused. "From the inside." My wolf, who had been moving at a steady, contented pace since we cleared the gate, made a sound in my chest that was as close as he ever got to satisfaction. A deep, settled warmth. The feeling of a thing that has been sought for a long time finally found and understood to be real. I looked sideways at her on the gray horse, her pack balanced easily across the horse's back, her eyes on the road ahead. She was watching the past the way she had watched every room, alert, unhurried, taking in the shape of the world she was entering. She said, without looking at me, "The mark is warm right now." "It's going to be warm for a long time," I said. Is that, she considered the question she was forming. Does it settle, or does it stay like this? "I don't know," I said. "It's the first time it's burned for anyone." She looked at me then. "You've carried it your whole life," she said. "I have. And it never burned before." "Not once," I said. She absorbed that. She turned back to the road. The mountain pass dropped away to the valley below, the Ashmark Valley in the distance, further than this afternoon, too far to see yet, but there. She knew it was there because I had told her. She was trusting a direction before she could see the destination. "I stopped hoping for this," she said very quietly. "About 4 years ago. The same time I stopped listening at the window. I decided it was easier to not want a wolf, not want a mate, not want any of it. Easier than wanting it and watching everyone else get it." "I know," I said. "You couldn't know," she said. "You had the mark, you knew it would happen." "I knew it was possible," I said. "There is a difference, 3 years of silence, 3 years of carrying a mark that never lit and not knowing if the thing it was waiting for was real." I paused. I had started to wonder. She was quiet for a long moment. The road turned and the wind shifted and the peaks were behind us now, the valley opening ahead. "We both stopped waiting at about the same time," she said. "It seems so," I said. She looked at the valley below. "And then you rode through a gate," she said. "And my wolf heard something I didn't," I said, "and he said there." She said nothing for a moment. Then, "I felt it too. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was nerves, about the summit, about having to serve in rooms full of alphas. But it was a different kind of feeling than nerves, it was." "A pull," I said. "Yes," she said, "exactly that." The valley was closer now. The Ashmark Valley, where my hold was, where my pack ran in the mornings and gathered in the evenings and kept the fire that had been kept there for a very long time. Where there would be, very soon, a Luna who had never been to a ceremony and intended to be at every one. I said, "There is a ceremony at the new moon, 2 weeks from now. You don't have to join it, not the first one, not if you need more time." She said, "I'll be there." "You don't have to decide." "I have been standing at a window for 20 years, she said, not impatiently, just with the clarity of someone who has thought through a thing completely. "I am done standing at windows." My wolf settled. The warm weight of him, the steady glad certainty, not triumphant, nothing as noisy as triumph. Just the peace of an animal that has been carrying a question for a very long time and has, at last, been given the answer and found it to be everything it had waited for. The road wound down. The valley opened below us, and the hold's towers were visible in the distance. And between us and them was just the afternoon and the cold, and the sound of the horses on the road, and the burning steady gold of the Ashmark between us, keeping its word. I had carried it for 34 years. It had never lied to me. It had never burned for the wrong thing or pointed me toward a mistake. It had been quiet for a long time, and then it had burned. She had been inside a hold, carrying a lamp in the dark corridors for 20 years. And she had kept past the assessment, past the ceremonies she was barred from, past the word Wolfless said in front of every room she entered. She had kept the thing you need to keep when you are waiting for something you cannot fully believe in anymore. The readiness. The door left barely open. The refusal, even at the last, to be entirely wrong about yourself. I had met her 2 days before. My wolf had known her a long time. That evening, when we stopped at the pass-way station, a small fire, the other riders giving us space with the tact of people who understood they were witnesses to something they were not part of, she sat across the fire from me and held her hands out to the warmth, and the mark on my wrist glowed between us in the dark, and she looked at it with an expression I did not have a word for except arrived. Not where she had arrived from, where she had arrived to. I thought, this is what I want to remember. Not the summit hall, not the Luna's blazing light, not the moment Thuric backed against the wall. This, the small fire, her hands, the mark burning between us. The expression on her face of a woman who has come home to a place she has never been before and finds that the word home applies anyway completely, without reservation. She looked up and caught me looking. She did not look away. She said, "You're staring again." "I am," I agreed. "You did it the whole first day," she said. "I kept thinking you were trying to figure out if I was a threat. I was trying to figure out why my wolf wouldn't look anywhere else." She considered this. The fire between us was warm and the pass was cold and the dark was very complete outside the ring of light. "And now you know," she said. "Now I know," I said. She settled back. She looked at the fire. After a while she said, "Cairn." "Yes. Thank you for saying it in the hall. What you said about Rannoch about the assessment, you didn't have to explain it. I wanted it understood," I said. "Not as an accusation, as a record. What happened to you should be understood so it doesn't happen to someone else." "It probably will," she said. "To someone else somewhere, an assessment done wrong, a grief wound no one recognizes." "Probably," I said, "but not to you, not anymore." She nodded, very small. The fire settled. The mark burned its steady gold. Outside the way station, in the dark of the pass, my wolf lifted his head and breathed in the cold air, and he was content in the way he had not been content in years. The long waiting finally over, the found thing found, the world the right shape again at last. We rode into the Ashmark Valley the following afternoon. The pack turned out the way packs do when an alpha returns from a summit, and this time there was more. They felt the mark before I was through the gate, the way wolves feel a true mate bond arrive in their alpha. The gate was lined. I heard the change in the pack's sound, the recognition of something coming home that belonged there. Senna rode beside me. She looked at the pack the way she had looked at every room, alert, unhurried, present. She was not afraid. She was reading the shape of the world she was entering. Her wolf, who had waited 20 years in the dark, moved inside her with the quiet confidence of an animal who has been patient long enough. I brought her through the gate and into the hold, and the mark blazed gold as we crossed the threshold together, and someone in the pack, one of the old wolves near the inner wall, raised a long, sustained howl. The others took it up. Senna beside me heard it. She closed her eyes for a moment, just a moment. When she opened them, she was looking straight ahead at the hold, at the life that was beginning, and whatever expression was on her face, it was not the expression of a woman standing at a window listening to something she wasn't allowed to join. She was inside. That was the whole of it, and it was enough, and it was everything.